Welcome back to the McCann Dogs podcast. We are going to be recording episode 32 today, and I am excited for that. Joining me, as always, is the Director of Online Training for the My Dog Can program, Shannon Viljasso. Thanks for joining us, Shannon.
Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody.
So you wrote an article in our blog that asks if a dog trainer could only tell you one thing, it would be. And I thought this was a really interesting article, and it was something that I wanted to talk about with our podcast audience, or talk about to our podcast audience. You mentioned a headline is that training mode is a hoax, and today we're going to dive into why training mode is a hoax for your dog. I'm Ken Steep, and welcome back to McCann Dogs. Now, Shannon, you wrote this article a little over a year ago, and it was well received when it was first published. And I think part of it is the shocking titles. I mean, when I read "Training Mode is a Hoax," that stopped me in my tracks, and I needed to read further. So, what do you mean when you talk about training mode being a hoax?
Well, we get questions all the time about how to solve behaviors in the home, behaviors outside of the home, how to get our dogs to have good manners and be good members of the community. And you don't get that by training 15 minutes a day. You don't get that by going into training mode and teaching your dog during training mode and then the rest of the time not dealing with things. You get consistent good information from your dogs by being consistent with them. And that means having a plan for the rest of the time. So yes, you're going to set aside time to train skills with your dog without question. You're going to set aside, 15 minutes here, 10 minutes there. Short training sessions through the day are always great, but you also need to make sure that when you're not set up to train, when your bait pouch isn't strapped on, when you're not, leash in hand and ready to go, you are still being consistent with your dog and helping them understand the rules of life. And that's really what I meant by training mode is a hoax, because training mode itself is not going to create that well-behaved family member. Training mode is something that's going to help, but you also need to make sure the rest of the time you're doing things that will help your dog learn and understand and be a good member of the household as well.
Yeah, and I think it really points to the idea that the dogs are always learning. And, this is something that we know very, very well, having, as we see puppies come in, all breeds, temperaments, ages, dogs are always learning. And whether it's good or bad, you need to be there to sort of guide that information. And let's talk about how dogs are always learning, and how you interact and engage with them makes all of the difference in the world.
Definitely. So dogs' brains are fully developed by 7 weeks of age. And from that time, from 1 week to 7 weeks, where they are, or I guess from 0 weeks to 7 weeks, where they are learning and growing with their litter mates, they're building all sorts of life skills in there. And then once they get to the point where they go off into their individual homes, they're going to learn more life skills and how to specifically adapt to now potentially being away from other dogs completely, coming away from their litter mates and going into a brand new situation where they don't know the people, they don't know the other dogs in the household, and they've got to figure out how to fit in there. From our perspective, we need to figure out how to help them fit in there. And that means knowing what you're headed towards, what skills are important for me to have with my new puppy, and having a plan in place so that you can make sure that you execute those things. There's a fly buzzing around me again. And we also want to make sure that we're giving our dogs the opportunity to learn the right things. Because like I said, brains are fully developed at 7 weeks of age, which means that they are always learning. Every minute that they're awake, they're learning something. And it's so much nicer if they learn the things that we want them to learn, rather than learning things on their own and sort of making up the rules as they go along. So keep in mind as well, there's a saying in dog training that goes, what they learn first, they learn best. And that is so, so true. If your dog starts early rehearsal of behaviors that you don't like, for example, like jumping up on people, those habits are going to stick with them a lot longer than if you right off the bat discourage that jumping up. And with a baby puppy, you're probably not going to be able to teach them not to jump up with all sorts of obedience skills because they don't know that yet. So management would be a great thing for that situation. You know, if I have a baby puppy and someone wants to come and greet them, if I know that they're going to jump up and potentially get reinforced for that, I might actually pick them up so that that person can say hello to my puppy while they're up in my arms, and they're not going to get that opportunity to jump on that person, but they still get to say hello and, you know, have a little bit of interaction with the person. A couple of weeks down the road, after I've taught my puppy how to sit, for example, I'm going to start working on polite greeting with my dog holding a sit at my side. But in the initial phases, the management is what's really going to help you through. So again, the training mode with that, you might be working with your puppy 5 minutes several times a day, teaching them things like sit and emotional control. As distractions come in, they hold the sit. But when the distractions are too tough and you're not in that training mode, you need to make sure that the puppy is still getting good information. So whatever it is you need to do in order to manage that situation is what's going to come into play in that case.
Now, I so often advocate for the use of a house line and for using a crate for management. And I think those are two of the best tools you can have as a trainer for your dog, or, to be giving them good information 100% of the time, that a puppy owner can have. And, I always suggest, if people say, oh, I don't really want to use a crate, there's just so many reasons why the crates can be such a valuable training tool, but also a means to keep your dog safe. And more importantly, a place for them to, go and relax. When they've had enough of the busy household, they can just pop into their own crate by themselves and just have a snooze. Puppies love to sleep, and it's nice for them to have a spot they can call their own.
Yes, most definitely. And they'll learn to love their crate. It becomes a nice little den for them. If you make it nice and comfortable, as long as they're not chewing on bedding, etc., as long as they're either before that phase or they're past that phase, you can leave nice comfy bedding in the crate with them and they can have a snuggle in. I always, when I have my young puppies at home for the first week or so, I always have them elevated when they're in their crate sleeping. I'll usually have them on the bed beside me or on the end table beside my bed, so that if they wake up in the middle of the night, they know I'm right there. They don't feel isolated and alone. A lot of times people go for the end product right away, which would be, for example, crate in the laundry room in the adult dog household. Mm-hmm. So if you bring home a baby puppy that's been used to having 5 or 6 warm bodies snuggled around them, plus mom, plus some humans wandering around, and now all of a sudden you isolate them, that's a really unpleasant experience for a puppy. So for the first week, at least, consider having them somewhere with you, and then you can wean away from that. Once they're really comfortable with the crate and you're past that initial crate training phase, now you can take that crate and you can put it in a location where it's a little bit more convenient. But in the initial stages, make them really comfortable, make the crate a very positive space, and don't isolate the puppy for those first few evenings at home. Keep them nice and comfortable with you.
Yeah, really, really sage advice. We've published a video on our YouTube channel about how to crate train your puppy and how to make your puppy love their crate. And I will post a link in the show notes below if you're listening to the audio podcast, or a card above if you're watching our new video podcast channel. And I think you'll find it really helpful. Now, the other thing that you mentioned briefly is the house line, and talk about how the house line can help you give your puppy good information.
Yeah, the house line is absolutely a 100% must for any puppy. They're all mischievous, and not intentionally mischievous, not like they're, evil planning to take over the
twirling
world.
Their little mustaches or something.
Actually, I just wrote a blog post titled, "Is your dog an evil genius? Or is there some other reason they're doing that?" So that was fresh in my mind. Yeah, exactly. Definitely. They do the things that come naturally to them, and the things that work, and the things that reinforce them. So that sometimes goes against what we want them to do. It sometimes means they're going to rifle through the laundry, grab the dirtiest sock or pair of underwear, and run around the house with you in hot pursuit, trying to chase them down. They might dig out in the yard, and then when you go to stop them, they play catch me if you can. There's all sorts of little things that puppies will do. And the unfortunate thing in those situations is that they're actually, as we said, they're always learning. Training mode is a hoax. So your puppy is going to learn to do just that. They're going to learn to play keep away from you. They're going to learn that there's value in that because it's fun. Puppies love, if you watch a litter of puppies or a bunch of puppies playing together, you will see they love playing catch me if you can. They love playing keep away with the other puppies. It is a blast for puppies to do that. So when your puppy does that, they're not doing it to be the evil genius. They're doing it because it's fun and they think you're interacting in a game with them. And that game gets reinforced. And sometimes the humans get angry and then the dog learns that, when you're upset, I need to play keep away, and things get worse and worse and worse. So the house line, such a great tool for keeping your dog safe and under some semblance of control, even before they have any sort of obedience skills. I always have my puppies dragging a long line or a leash in the house. I usually cut the handle off. Actually, Ken just did a video on the $2 solution to the best puppy training tool in the world. And literally that just is a cheap leash that you can drag around, cut the handle off of, and let your puppy drag around in the yard and in the house so that you can get control of them. And basically the idea is now you've got this handle. So your dog goes in the laundry hamper and grabs that sock, and right away you can just calmly walk up, step on the line, and then you can deal with the situation at hand. You don't need to be in a situation where you're now your dog is learning to play keep away and they're having this really fun game and this really good time and getting reinforced with that. You are creating a situation where you're taking the fun out of that scenario and you're saying to the puppy, there's no reinforcement for you grabbing that sock and running with it. Let's play with something else instead. Here's one of your toys. Here's a Kong. What a good puppy. Let's play and interact with that. And then you have a better chance of controlling the show and controlling the game that the dog is learning to play.
And in that video that I published on our YouTube channel, I talked about those events where maybe you drop a pill on the floor, or there's something that could be dangerous for your puppy. Maybe it's something sharp. You break a dish or a glass or something like that. Having that kind of control is so important, not only for the simple management of the puppy, but to keep your puppy safe. It's really, really a great way to turn into a puppy training superhero for your dog. I don't all of our puppies go on house lines until they are responding to name reliably, until they are listening reliably, until we know that they aren't going to make mistakes that we can't verbally call them off of. So I think that's really important. When you talk about dog training time only being part of the equation, this is something that we often see in our classes. We can see the students who are working extra hard at home, who are, not just training once a week. They come for their hour and a half weekly classes. They're maybe training every day of the week, maybe every other day, but they're breaking those times up into, smaller training segments over the course of the day, whatever's convenient for them. But as a puppy training tip, I think it's really important to, always have some treats on you, or always have some treats readily available so that you can reward your dog for good choices.
Definitely. That is the first thing I do in the morning when I have a puppy in the house is I stick on pants that I can have a pocket with, and I stick treats in my pocket so that as soon as there's something I like, and there might, I might go through a whole morning where there's really nothing that I've seen that I thought, oh, that's great, I'm going to reward that. But I might go through a morning where there's 10 or 20 things that I think, wow, my puppy just did that. And I want to make sure that I make an impression and I make a lasting impression that I really liked that. And that was a great thing to do. So I'm going to make sure that I get in some rewards at that point. And really training your dog through with simple things through the day is going to be your best bet. Yes, 5 minutes of training time here and there to set up and practice specific skills is very, very important. I try to keep my training sessions no longer than 15 minutes ever with a young puppy. And ideally, they're somewhere in between 5 minutes and 15 minutes, not quite as long as 15, but sometimes you need a little bit more time. But the rest of the time, things like making your dog sit and be polite while you put their food bowl down, for example. Things like making them sit while you put on your shoes or while you open the door, not allowing them to barge out that front door. All those things are all going to contribute to your dog being a well-behaved dog. What we want to convey with the idea that training mode is a hoax is that you have to make sure you're consistent. So for example, if you set up the best training situation in the world for dogs jumping up on guests at your front door. You've got somebody who's not novel and not exciting. They ring the doorbell and you're working with your dog, teaching them not to jump up when greeting guests. That's fantastic. And we need that repetition in order for the dogs to understand what it is we're asking of them. So you do need to take that time in that training mode to set skills in firmly with your dog and with their understanding. However, the rest of the time, if the doorbell rings and the dog's loose and they just go tearing at the door and you're holding them back and opening the door and the UPS guy's there trying to get you to sign and you're fumbling, and the dog is learning in that situation too. So outside of training mode doesn't mean that the brain shuts off with your dog. And unfortunately, now your dog is rehearsing that idea of trying to struggle and fight against you to actually get to what they want. And that's a really bad concept to teach any dog. So we definitely don't want our dog ever thinking that fighting us gets them a win. We want our dogs looking to us for information. And if they do make choices on their own, we want to make sure that we can either reinforce those choices for them being good ones, or we can redirect the behavior if it's not a good choice that we like. So in that situation, you've got a puppy in training, the doorbell rings. I actually love the idea of putting a little sign on your front door that says something like, please be patient, I have a puppy in training.
I
So
like that idea too.
yeah, it's fantastic. If somebody rings the doorbell, they know that, you know what, you know that you don't have to rush to the door. They've read the sign. They know you might be a minute longer, and you can take your time and either go and put the puppy away or do something with the puppy that you're going to be able to manage through that situation. So again, if it's a baby puppy, you can pick them up. That's great to have somebody come to the door and have the dog interact with that person at the door and know that this is a safe thing. The UPS guy coming, and he'll probably thank you once the dog's an adult as well if your dog's nice and friendly with him. But we want to make sure that we're not just allowing the downtime or the everyday rest of the time to fall into the toilet, so to speak.
Now, our My Dog Can students get access to a training journal, and we all have busy lives, and I know some of our podcast audience is probably listening to this and thinking about how they can relate to someone showing up at the door unexpectedly. With something like a training journal, it's a great opportunity to identify an issue or identify a training weakness. And if you're busy for you don't have time to train at that moment, but you can pop your dog in their crate and have them relax and hang out there. But you can mark down in that journal, or you can make notes and take notes and identify these training opportunities that when you do have a moment, when you do have some time, you can work on these things and just talk about the benefits. Because I know Shannon Shannon's idea to come up with this incredible training journal, but talk about some of the benefits if you feel like you are too busy to work on something right now, how advantageous it is to mark it down and then make sure you work on it later.
Yeah, definitely. So keeping track of as many details surrounding your training as you can is always going to be a good thing. So I like to write down very point form jotted notes. For example, I've just practiced a stay exercise and I used toys as a distraction. Duration was 45 seconds and the dog didn't make a mistake. So rewards were cheese and steak, and life was wonderful. But I'll also make note of things through the day. So for example, if I'm out on a walk with my dog and there's a distraction across the street and I decide, you know what, this is a great opportunity for me to practice a quick little sit stay, I will also make note of that once I get back home, or if I'm keeping notes in my phone, which I'll often do, that's because it's always handy. I will just jot down, did a stay with a dog across the street. So keeping those notes and coming back to them is a really nice way of understanding what sort of distractions you've worked with, remembering what your dog has already been exposed to, finding out where their weaknesses are as well, because you can usually draw correlations with things that you've written down, whether it's something about time of day or a specific treat that you've used or a specific distraction that was too tough for your dog. You can go back in those notes and you can adjust and move forward and keep your training moving forward with those notes. It's also great for coming back to when you've got your next puppy and you think, okay, where do I start? This is really overwhelming. There's a lot to do. Go back to your training journal. Oh yeah. Okay. 5 minutes of that should be great. And then you can move forward with your new puppy as well with all sorts of extra hints and tidbits from the last one.
Well, and we know how important it is to build on a foundation of success. So starting off where you were the successful last time with your next training exercise is so advantageous. It's so helpful for your puppy. It's because you aren't over facing them. You aren't expecting them to have had the training fairies visit overnight and have done some magical training. Yes, with your dog. It's so helpful to really build on that foundation that we encourage it. Something that we talk about in the My Dog Can program is, how important the progressions are, that you're not rushing through the processes, that you're not, we have a very set level of understanding before we move on to the next skill. And let's talk about the My Dog Can program just for a minute for anyone on the podcast who might not be aware of what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So My Dog Can is our online version of our grade 1 training program. And in that program, we are going to teach the dogs to come when they're called, regardless of what distractions are out there. That is such an important skill. And we spend so much time on that skill here at McCann's because we think it is probably the most important skill you will ever have with any dog anywhere, ever. It's just absolutely crucial. So teaching them to come when they're called, teaching them to walk nicely with you on leash so you can enjoy walks again. And we also teach stationary exercises, which are so good for building self-control and building calmness into dogs. We work on things like reading manners. We've got all sorts of concepts that we teach in that program, things like drop it and leave it so you can keep your dog safe. When you sign up for the program, it's an 8-week program in total, but you get access to it for 4 months. And that way you've got some extra time to work through. There's also options to extend things if you don't think that you've been able to give enough time to the program within those 4 months. But there's lots of great support with that program. That's sort of what we really, really love about how we've been able to do things with My Dog Can. We've got people in the office that are professional dog trainers answering the phone for us all the time. So people in our program can always call and chat with one of the dog trainers, whether it's specifically about a skill we're covering in My Dog Can, or whether it's something else that's sort of outside of the spectrum that we can help you with as well over the phone. We're always happy to do that. We can take support questions by email. We can we can give you troubleshooting tips from watching videos that you've sent us. We also have a really great community in our Facebook group that's exclusive for My Dog Can members as well. And we spend a lot of time in that group teaching the why and talking about why dogs do what they do and moving forward to teach different concepts and different ways of learning. So outside of the My Dog Can program itself, we're teaching so much about actually training dogs. It's a lot of fun.
And for if you want to check out the My Dog Can program, you can actually take the first lesson for free. I'll post a link in the show notes below, and you can try it out for yourself and start having some of those successes. And I'm excited to see you over there. Certainly, the community idea or the community aspect of the My Dog Can program is something that I really enjoy as one of the instructors. I love seeing those people celebrate their wins. And I also love how the community is there to talk about a similar problem. Maybe it's a walking on loose leash challenge that they've got with their specific dog, and other people may say, "Oh, my dog really struggles, in this situation as well." It's such a wonderful sense of community there, and I really, really do enjoy it. So you can check it out for free at the link in the show notes below. Well, I hope you guys were able to have a little better understanding of puppy training, understanding that how training mode is a hoax, because I love how Instructor Shannon had started this whole thing off with us. Now, if this is your first time checking out our McCann Dogs podcast, make sure you subscribe. If this is your first time seeing us on our McCann Dogs video podcast, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're publishing new podcasts every single week to help you really understand the why behind dogs and dog training. So, Shannon, I want to thank you for sharing your expertise today and filling us in on some of these awesome dog training topics.
My pleasure. It was fun again.
On that note, I want to wish you well, and thanks for listening, and happy training. Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.